Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video on completing the square. So this is another tool we can use for solving quadratic equations, and by the end of this video you should be able to use it to solve quadratic equations or to determine that there is no solution. It's sort of an alternative to the quadratic formula. So what's the idea here? Well, we're just going to look at monic quadratics here, like x squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. What we want to do is take this quadratic expression here and write it as a perfect square. So it turns out it'll be written like this: plus or minus some number equals 0. So this box here will only have a number, no x's. So we'll get an equation where x is in only one spot, and then we can use difference of two squares to solve the equation. So let's look at an example. So let's say we have this equation here: x squared plus 6x minus 11 equals 0. We're not going to have any luck trying to find two numbers that multiply to negative 11 and add to 6. But we could easily calculate the discriminant and find that there are two solutions. So we could solve this using the quadratic formula. Now we're going to use completing the square. So what I want to do is I want to write this as x plus some number all squared plus or minus some other number equals 0. So what number goes in here is b over 2. Always b over 2. So in this example, b was 6. So I want to write this as x plus 3 all squared. Now the thing is, x plus 3 all squared is x squared plus 6x plus 9. So you can see that x plus 3 squared, the first two terms are right, but the last term is different. So I want to write this so it looks like this. So I can write x squared plus 6x minus 11. What I can do is I can add the 9 to make this into a perfect square. But of course, to balance out the equation, I also need to subtract 9. So this is the same equation as this. I've just added 9 and subtracted 9 to balance things out. So x squared plus 6x plus 9 I know is x plus 3 squared. And then I'm left with minus 11 minus 9, which is minus 20. So I can solve this using the difference of two squares. I have a perfect square minus a perfect square. So I'm going to factorize this the same way I've done all along. I'm going to square root the first thing. So to square root what's in the brackets, I just write x plus 3. Square root of x plus 3 squared is just x plus 3. Square root of anything squared is just itself. So then I'm going to square root 20. So then remember, for difference two squares, one gets a plus, one gets a minus. Now I can solve using the null factor law. So let's say the first bracket is equal to 0. So to solve this, I just subtract 3 from both sides and then subtract the square root of 20 from both sides. Square root of 20 is just a number, like 4.47. So that is one solution, minus 3 minus root 20. So the other solution, if the second bracket is equal to 0, we're going to do something very similar. We're going to first subtract 3, and then we're going to add root 20 to both sides. So the second solution is minus 3 plus root 20. So this is exactly the same set of solutions I would have obtained using the quadratic formula. So it allowed us to find these obscure solutions. All right, let's do another example. So let's look at solving this equation here. X squared minus 8x plus 13 is equal to 0. So I could try and find two numbers that multiply to 13 and add to negative 8, but I'd be here all day. I can solve this using the quadratic formula or completing the square. I'm going to use completing the square. So b, the number in front of x, is equal to minus 8. So b over 2 is equal to minus 4. So how does that help us? I want to write x squared minus 8x plus 13 as x minus 4 squared plus or minus some number. So x minus 4 all squared is x squared minus 8x, so the first two terms are right, but it has a 16 on the end. So what I want to do is take my x squared minus 8x plus 13. I want to add 16 and then subtract 16 to balance it out. So this equation and this equation are the same, but writing it like this allows me to write a perfect square. This is a perfect square. So I write it as x minus 4 squared. Now 13 minus 16 is minus 3. So now I have difference of two squares equals 0. I'm going to factorize. So if I square root the first, I get x minus 4. If I square root the second, which is 3, just root 3, 1 gets a plus and 1 gets a minus. So I solve this like I did on the previous slide. Hopefully you can see that the solutions will be x equals 4 plus or minus root 3. So x equals 4 plus root 3 is one solution, x equals 4 minus root 3 is the other solution. All right, let's look at one more example. So let's try and solve x squared minus 10x plus 30 equals 0 using completing the square. So we have b is minus 10, so b over 2 is equal to minus 5. So I want to write this as x minus 5 all squared. So x minus 5 all squared is x squared minus 10x plus 25. So now I'm going to rewrite this as x squared minus 10x plus 30, but to make it a perfect square, I need this 25. So I'm going to add 25, but then take 25 away, just so it's balanced out. So this is this, it's a perfect square. So I can write this as x minus 5 squared. 30 minus 25 gives positive 5. Now, when you get a situation like this, where this is positive, there are actually no solutions. So why is that? Well, firstly, this is not the difference of two squares. It's a square plus another square. We have actually no way to factorize x squared plus a squared. It can't be factorized. There are no solutions. If you have x squared plus 1 equals 0, there are no solutions. If you have x squared plus, say, 16 is equal to 0, there are no solutions. Another way to look at this is if I were to subtract 5 from both sides, which you can do, that's balancing an equation, I would get x minus 5 squared is equal to negative 5. I would have a perfect square equaling a negative, and you can't do that. Whenever you square any number, you never get a negative. So we can't go any further. This actually has no solutions. You can also double check your answer by checking the discriminant. So the discriminant of this is b squared minus 4 by a by c, which is negative 20. Negative discriminant means no solutions. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.